This is Kang Min-ho, 29 years old, and if you saw him on the street, you would never look twice. Just another tired face in the crowd. But you would never ever guess that this man was once called a genius. Look at his eyes, empty, hollow. The eyes of a man who knows with total certainty that he wasted his entire life. Every gift he was born with, every door that was open to him, gone. But it didn't start this way, no. Once he was the boy with the brightest future in the whole city. So how did it all come to this? Let me tell you. Empty soju bottles. Cold takeout going stale on the floor. A rent notice he couldn't pay, taped to the door like an accusation. This was the kingdom he ruled now. A dead-end job he hated, a phone that never rang, no friends who remembered him, no dreams left to chase. Just the slow, gray hum of a life going absolutely nowhere. And here's the cruelest part. He knew exactly when it had all gone wrong. He could point to the single moment everything started to rot. He could even put a name to it. One name. He could even put a name to it. One name. He could even tame to it. One name. He could name her. Rewind. Go back years ago. Min-ho was the kind of student teachers whispered about in the staff room. At 10, he was solving problems meant for kids twice his age. At 12, he skipped grades like they were stepping stones across a stream. Numbers bent to his will. Books opened their secrets to him without a fight. While other children struggled, learning came to Min-ho as easily as breathing. And everyone, every single teacher, every neighbor agreed on one thing. This boy would go far. This boy was special. This boy would change the world someday. His parents weren't rich, far from it. His father drove a delivery truck through the night. His mother worked double shifts until her hands ached. But every perfect score Min-ho brought home lit them up like a holiday. He was their hope, their pride, their proof that a hard, ordinary life could still produce something extraordinary. Our son, his mother would say, our son is going to do great things. And Min-ho carried that hope quietly inside him, the way you carry something fragile and precious that you are terrified of dropping. He swore he would never let them down. By 16, his name sat at the very top of the school ranking board. First place. Always first place, month after month, like it belonged to him. Teachers told him the most prestigious university in the country was already as good as his. A full scholarship, a guaranteed golden future. All he had to do was keep walking the straight, bright road laid out in front of him. Just keep walking, and he would have. He really, truly would have. The road was right there. But then, one quiet spring morning, she walked into his classroom, and nothing was ever the same again. Yuna, a transfer student. She sat by the window, and when the afternoon light caught her hair just right, Min-ho forgot the equation on the board entirely. The chalk stopped halfway through a number. For the first time in his sharp, brilliant life, his mind went completely quiet. No numbers, no rankings, no future, just her. Just the sound of his own heartbeat, suddenly loud in his ears. He didn't know it yet, the poor fool. But that was the exact second his perfect future began to crack right down the middle. At first, it all felt harmless. Sweet, even. He offered to tutor her after class. She smiled and said yes. And suddenly, the smartest boy in the entire school was finding reasons to stay late, to walk her home the long way, to memorize the way she laughed instead of memorizing his formulas. She seemed to need him. She seemed to choose him out of everyone. And to a lonely boy who had only ever been loved for his perfect grades, who had never once been wanted just for himself, that feeling was a drug he couldn't stop chasing. His books began to gather dust. The straighter boy started missing assignments, then whole weeks of them. Why study tonight when she might text him? Why grind for an exam a year away when she was here right now smiling at him? His teachers pulled him aside and warned him. His parents started to worry. But Min-ho just nodded, said all the right things, and kept slipping further. He told himself that love was worth more than any ranking, that a heart mattered more than a transcript, and he truly believed it. He was 16 and in love. What did he know about consequences? Then, one ordinary afternoon, he saw it. Yuna, laughing, climbing into a sleek, expensive foreign car. And beside her, holding the door open, a boy from one of the city's wealthiest families. Designer clothes, a watch worth more than Min-ho's father earned in a month. An easy, careless smile that said the whole world had always belonged to him. Everything Min-ho was not. And the girl he had quietly reshaped his entire life around? She didn't even glance back. Not once. The truth landed like ice in his stomach. She had never been his. He'd just been the comfortable, convenient boy who filled the empty hours until someone obedient boy who filled the empty hours until someone until the wake expensive foreign car. She let him down softly, and somehow that almost made it worse. You're a really good friend, Min-ho. The best, honestly. A friend. That was all he had ever been to her. He had burned an entire year of his life, his grades, his momentum, his shining future, all for a girl who saw him as nothing more than a friend. He nodded. He forced a smile. He said he understood. Of course he understood. And then he walked home alone in the cold rain and realized, all at once, that he had nothing left. Not her, and not the brilliant future he had traded away just to chase her shadow. He tried to fix it. God, he tried. He threw himself back into the books, cramming through the long sleepless nights, desperately chasing the months he had thrown away. But here's the brutal truth nobody tells you. A year of genius does not survive a year of neglect. The foundation had already cracked. The skills had gone rusty. The straight, bright road had quietly curved away from him while he wasn't looking. And the most important test of his entire life, the single exam that would decide everything, his university, his career, his whole future, was now only a few short weeks away. Their whole future was now only a few short weeks away. Exam day. The Great Hall was dead silent except for the scratching of 100 pens. Min-ho stared down at the first page, and his mind, the brilliant mind that had once made grown teachers gasp in amazement, went completely, horribly blank. The knowledge he had let rot away simply wasn't there when he reached for it. He grasped at the dark and caught nothing. His hands began to shake. Sweat ran down his back. The clock on the wall ate the minutes alive, one by one. And when he finally walked out of that hall, he already knew the terrible truth in his bones. He had failed. The genius. The boy who would change the world. He had failed. The rejection letters came one by one, like falling dominoes. The top university, gone. The second choice, gone. The safe backups he'd once sneered at, gone too. Even the scholarship that had practically had his name engraved on it, quietly withdrawn. Each cold email was a door swinging shut in his face. His parents read them over his shoulder and said nothing at all. There was nothing left to say. The golden boy they had bet their entire lives on, every double shift, every sacrifice, had thrown the whole thing away. And the part that would haunt him forever, he had done it to himself. No one to blame. No one but the boy in the mirror. And so, the long, gray years began. No prestigious degree meant no prestigious doors. Interview after interview, always the same polite, crushing rejection. We'll be in touch. They never were. So he took whatever work he could get. Convenience store night shifts, delivery routes in the rain, a forgotten cubicle in an office where no one even remembered hiring him. The boy who was supposed to change the world spent his entire 20s just scraping together enough to make rent. Day after identical, colorless day, the light in him slowly, quietly going out. And somewhere along the way, he stopped dreaming entirely. That's the part nobody ever warns you about. Your dreams don't die in some big dramatic crash. There's no final scene. They just quietly stop showing up, one by one, until you don't even notice they're gone. He would ride the last train home every night, stare at his own tired reflection in the dark window glass, and feel the unbearable distance between who he had been and who he had become. A genius. They had really called him that once. Now he couldn't even remember the last time he had felt proud of a single thing 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 he'd done. His mother fell ill the year he turned 26. He sat by her hospital bed, holding a hand that had worked itself raw and rough for his sake, and he had nothing. Nothing to show for all her years of sacrifice. No success to make her proud. No comfort he could offer her. Just a throat full of apologies he could never quite force himself to say out loud. And when she finally slipped away, a part of Kang Min-ho went quiet right along with her. Quiet for good. Because he had let down the one person in the whole world who had always believed in him. And then, 3 long years later, on one more ordinary lonely night, he made a mistake. He opened social media. He shouldn't have searched for her name. Some part of him knew that. But his thumb moved on its own, the way it always had around her. Yuna, the girl who had cost him absolutely everything. He just wanted to see, only once, what her life had become, whether she even thought of him. He found out. Oh, he found out. And it gutted him all over again, as fresh and sharp as the day she'd walked away. A wedding. A sprawling mansion rising up behind her, and on her arm a wealthy, successful man, the exact kind of life she had always been quietly reaching toward. She was radiant. She was glowing. She was happy in a way Min-ho hadn't felt in over a decade. She had absolutely everything, and it was painfully, obviously clear that she had never once, not for a single second, spent a thought on the boy who had set his entire future on fire for her sake. Min-ho sat there alone in the dark of his tiny apartment, staring at her perfect, beautiful life, holding the smoking ruins of his own. He didn't cry. Not really. He was far too empty for tears. He just laughed. A small, broken, awful little laugh, alone in the dark. Because what else was there to do? One bad year, one foolish, lovesick heart. That was all it had taken to completely derail a life that every single person swore was destined for greatness. If only he could go back. If only he could reach through time, grab that smug 16-year-old idiot by the collar and scream the truth into his face. Stop! Wake up! You're throwing it all away. But that's not how life works, is it? You don't get do-overs. Nobody? You're throwing it all away, but that's not how life works, is it? You don't get do-overs. Nobody does. No person swore was destined for greatness. It was past midnight now, which meant, somewhere in all that gray misery, it had quietly become his birthday. 29 years old. No calls, no messages, no one to remember. Just a sad little convenience store cake on the floor and a single candle he almost didn't bother to light at all, but he lit it anyway. Old habits. He sat there and looked at the tiny trembling flame in the dark, and in a tired, hollow voice that didn't even believe its own words, Kang Min-ho made the only wish he had left in him to make. "Let me go back," he whispered into the dark. "Just let me start over. Let me undo it all. Please, just this once." It wasn't a real wish, he knew that. It was just a broken man talking to an empty room the way broken men do at midnight. So he leaned forward and blew out the candle. The little flame died and the apartment went pitch dark, and Kang Min-ho lay down on the cold floor, closed his eyes, and waited for the same gray nothing that swallowed every other night of his wasted life. But then, something went very, very wrong. Or maybe, for the first time in 13 years, something went very, very wrong. Or maybe, for the first time in 13 years, something went very well with the candle. A roar filled his ears. Blinding white light came flooding in from nowhere, tearing through the pitch black like a crashing tide. His body felt weightless, then crushed under impossible pressure, then weightless all over again. And his memories began ripping past him in reverse, years unspooling in mere seconds. The dead-end job, his mother's funeral, the rejection letters, Yuna climbing into that car, faster and faster and faster, dragging him violently backward through his own ruined life. He tried to scream. No sound came out at all. The light swallowed everything. And then, all at once, in a single heartbeat, everything just stopped. He woke up gasping, bolting upright. Sunlight. Warm, gentle morning sunlight, the kind he hadn't felt on his skin in years. His heart was slamming against his ribs. This wasn't his cold, dark apartment. The walls around him were covered in old band posters he'd completely forgotten he ever owned. And the air smelled like his mother's cooking drifting in from down the hall. His mother. His hands flew up in front of his face, smaller now, smoother, younger. He stared at them, trembling. What was happening to him? This wasn't possible. This could not possible. This wasn't possible. This could not possibly be real. He stumbled out of bed and threw himself in front of the mirror. And there he was, 16 years old. Smooth, unlined skin, bright, clear eyes, no stubble, no dark circles, none of the 13 long years of regret that had been carved so deeply into his face. He pressed a shaking hand against the cold glass, half expecting the whole thing to shatter the illusion and throw him back into the dark. But it didn't shatter. The boy in the mirror moved exactly when he moved, touched the glass when he did. This was real. Somehow, impossibly, against every law of the universe, Kang Min-ho was real. Somehow, impossibly, against every law of the universe, Kang Min-ho was Jepshing. He tore through his desk, hands shaking, searching for proof. A calendar, he found it. And the date hit him like a physical punch to the gut. It was years before the exam, before the rejections, before his mother got sick, before everything fell apart. And there, sitting right on the desk, was a report card with his name printed at the very top. First place. He was back. He was actually back, standing at the exact crossroads where one foolish boy had taken a golden future and thrown it straight into the fire. Except this time was different. This time, he had every single memory of what was coming. Slowly, the panic drained out of him. And something colder, something harder took its place. He knew every mistake he was about to make because he had already made every single one of them. He knew who would smile at him and who would betray him. He knew exactly how the story ended if he let it play out the same way. But here's the thing, he wasn't a foolish, lovesick boy anymore, not on the inside. Behind those bright 16-year-old eyes now sat a man carrying 13 years of regret and one single burning promise. This time, he would not waste it. This time, he would not waste it. This time, he would take everything that was stolen from him. This time, everything would be different. And as that cold resolve settled into his chest, Kang Min-ho began to smile. The classroom door slid open, and Kang Min-ho stepped through it like a man returning to a battlefield he already knew how to win. Same desks, same faces, same fluorescent hum that once defined his small, wasted world. But the boy walking in was no longer small. 16 on the outside, 29 years of regret on the inside, and every single one of those years had taught him exactly what to do. Where the others saw a Tuesday morning, Min-ho saw a map of everything that was about to happen, and this time he was holding the pen. Yuna saw him first. She lit up the way she always did, that practiced, dazzling smile that had once made him forget his own name. In his old life, he'd have tripped over his own feet to reach her. He'd have smiled back like a fool. He'd have started the slow, stupid descent that cost him his money, his pride, and 12 years of his only chance at a life. He knew exactly where that smile led, straight off a cliff. He'd already made the fall once. But this time he looked right through her. No smile, no nod, nothing. He simply turned and walked to a seat by the window. Behind him, Yuna's smile froze, then faltered, her hands still half raised in the air, fingers curdling on empty space. For the first time in her life, the boy who would have done anything for her hadn't even noticed she existed. It was a small thing, a nothing thing, and it bothered her far more than it had any right to. At his desk, Min-ho stared out the window and began to plan. He remembered everything. Which questions appeared on every exam, down to the wording. Which stocks would explode in 3 years, which classmates would rise, and which would quietly destroy themselves. He knew Seo Jung-hyuk would graduate at the top, marry Yuna, and inherit an empire built on other people's ruin. He knew the bully's secrets, every ugly one. Knowledge was a weapon. Most people spent their lives praying for a second chance. Min-ho had one, and he intended to be merciless with it. That night, while the city slept, Min-ho studied. Not the way a frightened student crams the night before a test, the way a starving man eats. He devoured chapters in minutes, his adult mind tearing through material that once terrified the boy he used to be. There was no fear left in him, only focus. Cold, surgical, terrifying focus. The lamp burned long past midnight and then past 2 and then toward dawn. His eyes ached, his hand cramped. He didn't stop. Pain, he had learned, was just the sound of getting stronger. Before sunrise, he ran. The old Min-ho had been soft, slouched, weak, a body that perfectly matched his broken spirit. Not anymore. Every morning his shoes hit the cold pavement while the world still dreamed. Push-ups in the dark until his arms shook, lungs burning. A boy rebuilding himself from the bones outward. If he was going to conquer this life, the body would have to keep pace with the mind. A sharp blade in a rusted sheath is still useless, so he sharpened both, every single day. Then came the first exam. Around him, students gripped their pens, sweating, panicking, scribbling and erasing and scribbling again. Min-ho read the questions once and almost smiled. He had seen them before, lived them before. His pen moved like it already knew every answer because it did. While the rest of the class drowned, he simply remembered. He finished early, set down his pen, folded his hands, and watched the clock with the patience of a man who had nothing left in the world to fear. The hard part of his life was already behind him. 3 days later, the rankings went up. A crowd swarmed the board in the hallway, jostling, craning their necks, and then the whisper started, low at first, then rising into something almost frantic. Because at the very top, in bold red ink, sat a name nobody expected, not Jung-hyuk, not the usual elites with their private tutors and exam prep empires. Kang Min-ho, rank 1, in the entire grade. The boy who'd been a forgettable nobody just weeks ago had quietly, completely crushed every single one of them. How? How did HE do it? Was it a fluke? Did he cheat? The whispers chased him down the hall like smoke, clinging to his shoulders, but Min-ho walked through them without breaking stride, hands in his pockets, eyes forward, expression unreadable. He didn't owe anyone an explanation. He didn't even owe them a glance. Let them talk. Let them doubt. By the time they finished arguing about whether it was real, he'd already be 3 steps ahead. Again, and again, and again, until doubt curdled into something closer to awe. Yuna couldn't stop watching him. This wasn't the shy boy who used to steal nervous glances at her over his textbook. This was someone new. Calm, untouchable, the kind of presence that filled a room without ever raising its voice. She found her eyes drifting to him in class, during lunch, in the crowded halls between periods, and she hated, truly hated, that she couldn't understand why her heart had started doing something strange and unfamiliar whenever he simply walked past without looking at her. And then there was Seo Jung-hyuk, the golden boy. Rich, brilliant, born on third base, and fully convinced he'd hit a triple. He had never finished second to anyone in his entire life, and he'd never once imagined he could. He stared at the rankings, at that unfamiliar name sitting above his own, and something cold crawled up his spine and settled in his stomach. A feeling he didn't have a word for because he'd never felt it before. For the first time ever, Seo Jung-hyuk felt threatened. He cornered Min-ho after class, blocking his path with the easy entitlement of a boy who'd never been told no. Enjoy the top spot, he sneered, adjusting his glasses. Lucky guesses don't last. People like you don't stay up there. Min-ho looked at him, unbothered, almost bored, like a man watching a child throw a tantrum. People like me, he repeated softly. Then he leaned in close. I know exactly where you'll be in 10 years, Jung-hyuk, and trust me, you should be worried about a lot more than one ranking. And he walked away, leaving the golden boy frozen and speechless. The bullies hadn't gotten the message yet. They found him near the stairwell after the halls emptied. The same 3 who'd made his first life a living nightmare, cracking their knuckles, grinning, expecting the trembling, apologizing boy they remembered so fondly. Heard you got smart, the leader laughed, shoving him toward the lockers. Let's see how smart you are with a busted lip, genius. They closed in, all swagger and cheap cologne and borrowed muscle. And Min-ho just stood there, hands loose at his sides, perfectly calm. Min-soo, Min-ho, said quietly to the leader, using his name like a scalpel. Your father's gambling again. The loan sharks come for your house in 2 weeks. You already know it. The grin slid right off the bully's face. And you, he turned to the second, the convenience store cameras caught what you took last Friday. He named their secrets one by one, things no one alive should know, things that hadn't even happened yet. The color drained from their faces. They stepped back. They glanced at each other. And then they ran. They never touched him again. Word spread fast in a school like this. Don't mess with Kang Min-ho. He knows things. He sees things before they happen. There's something wrong about that kid. Something that makes your blood run cold just standing near him. Min-ho didn't bother correcting a single rumor. Let them grow. Fear, he'd learned the hard and humiliating way in his last life, was just another tool lying on the table. And the man who picked it up first controlled the entire room. But Min-ho did something his bitter, broken first life self had never once done. He helped. The quiet kids. The overlooked ones. The students everyone else had already written off. He sat with them after school in the library, explaining the things that came so easily to him now, patiently, asking nothing at all in return. In his last life, he'd burned every bridge he ever crossed and died alone in a cold apartment. This time, he was building something far stronger than grades or trophies. He was building loyalty, one person at a time. And it worked, slowly, quietly, the way the most important things always do. A circle began to form around him. Kids who would have walked through fire for the boy who finally, truly saw them. They passed him notes, covered for him, spread his name like gospel through every classroom. While Jung-hyuk bought followers with his father's money and his father's name, Min-ho earned his with respect and patience. One was loyalty rented by the hour. The other was loyalty owned outright. And when the storm finally came, only one of them would still be standing. The competitions came next. Math Olympiad, Science Fair, the national essay contest that elite schools fought over. Min-ho entered them all, and he won them all. Trophy after trophy, certificate after certificate, stacking up like trophies of a war no one else even knew was being fought. The school that once couldn't remember his name now printed it on banners across the front gate. Teachers fought over the right to mentor him. Universities sent letters years too early. The nobody had become the name everyone suddenly wanted attached to their own. And Jung-hyuk watched it all from the edges, fists clenched white, jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. Every trophy Min-ho lifted was a blade twisted slowly into his pride. He'd spent his whole life being the best, simply because everyone around him kept telling him he was. Now a boy from nothing was proving, in front of the entire school, that best was something you earned in the dark, not something you inherited in the light. For the first time, Seo Jung-hyuk felt small, and he despised the taste of it. By midterm, Min-ho had become untouchable. He walked the halls and the crowds parted around him without being asked. Teachers softened their voices when they spoke to him. Even the staff knew his name and used it carefully. He had rebuilt himself from a forgotten punchline into a living legend in the span of a single semester. But he never once let it go to his head. He'd already had everything a man could want in another life and watched every bit of it turn to ash in his hands. This was only the beginning. He knew it. He could feel it coming. And then Yuna came to him. She caught him alone after school near the lockers, cheeks flushed pink, fingers twisting the strap of her bag, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. The most popular girl in school, nervous, over him. "Min-ho," she said softly, almost shyly. "I've been wanting to talk to you for a while now. I don't know what changed in you, but I really like who you've become. Maybe we could spend some time together?" It was the exact moment his old self had begged the universe for. Year after wasted, desperate year. Min-ho looked at her for a long, quiet moment, and he remembered the call she never returned when he was drowning, the way her eyes slid right through him when he had nothing left to offer. The wedding to Young-hyuk he had watched from the gutter of his own ruined life, drunk and forgotten. She wasn't cruel, not exactly. She just only ever wanted whoever happened to be winning, and right now, in this moment, he was winning. That, and nothing more, was the only reason she was standing in front of him at all. "No," he said. Just one word, quiet and final and absolutely certain. Yuna blinked, sure she'd misheard him. "I have a future to build," he continued, his voice perfectly even, "and I'm building it alone. You're not part of it. You never will be. There was no anger in it, no bitterness, no old wound bleeding through. And that was the part that cut her deepest of all, that he felt nothing whatsoever where there had once been everything." He gave her a small nod, the kind you give a stranger on the street, and turned to leave. Yuna stood frozen in the empty hallway, watching his back grow smaller and smaller. Something twisted hard in her chest, sharp and new and completely unfamiliar. She had never once been the one left behind. She had never in her life wanted someone who didn't want her back. And as the door swung shut behind him with a soft final click, she finally felt it for the very first time. Regret. Cold, quiet, and absolutely perfectly deserved. The boy she'd thrown away had grown into someone she could no longer reach. Min-ho stepped out through the school gates into the golden evening light, the building shrinking behind him with every step. He didn't look back, not once. He'd reclaimed his name, his body, his future, and the respect of everyone who'd once forgotten he was alive. He turned weakness into power and shame into legend in the time it took most people to fail a single class. But all of this, every trophy and every whisper, was only the foundation. The classroom was never the real battlefield. The men who destroyed his first life were still out there, untouched, comfortable, unaware. Somewhere across the city, the people who had taken everything from him were laughing over expensive dinners, comfortable, certain of a future that no longer belonged to them. They didn't know his name yet. They would. Min-ho looked toward the glowing skyline and let himself feel it, just for one quiet moment. Not rage, not yet. Anticipation. He had won the easy part, the part that only cost him sleep. Now came the real war, the one that would cost them everything. And this time, Kang Min-ho intended to win it all. Every single piece. By now, Kang Min-ho was the top student in the entire nation. Every teacher praised him. Every rival feared him. But sitting alone in his small room one night, the city humming outside his window, he realized something that nobody else could understand. Grades were not the prize. Grades were just the door. And in his first wasted life, he had memorized far, far more than textbooks. He had lived through 15 long years of the future. And every one of those years was about to become a weapon. He picked up a pen and began to write. Names of companies, exact dates, market crashes he remembered watching destroy ordinary families. Tiny unknown startups he knew would one day explode into trillion-one giants. It was all still there, burned into his memory from a life nobody else knew he had lived. While the rest of the world stumbled forward blind, guessing it tomorrow, Min-ho already knew how the story ended. The future was not a mystery to him. The future was a map, and he was the only one holding it. He had been quietly tutoring the children of rich families for months, charging premium rates because he was the #1 student alive, and desperate parents would pay anything for an edge. The money piled up faster than he expected. Most teenagers would have spent it on clothes, on games, on showing off. Min-ho did not buy a single thing. He wore the same worn shoes, ate the same cheap meals, and walked everywhere to save bus fare. He took every one he had earned, and he opened his very first brokerage account. His hand hovered over the button. His heart was steady. To everyone else, this stock was a nobody. A small, unknown company most people had never even heard of, buried at the bottom of the market. Analysts ignored it. Investors laughed at it. But Min-ho remembered. In just a few short months, this little company would announce a breakthrough that sent its value rocketing toward the sky. He took a breath, and he pressed buy with everything he had saved. And then, calmly, he waited for the future to arrive. Weeks passed. He went to class. He aced his exams. He acted like nothing at all was happening. And then the announcement hit the news, exactly as he remembered it, down to the very week. The stock exploded. The line shot straight up off the chart. His small pile of tutoring money doubled, then tripled, then kept climbing. He sat alone in the dark, the glow of green numbers on his face, and he did not cheer. He did not jump. He just smiled, slow and quiet, because he had known all along. That night, he climbed to the school rooftop and looked out at the glittering city below. The towers, the corporate logos burning bright against the dark. The empires built by families who would one day become his rivals and his enemies. In his first life, he had stood in places like this and felt small, invisible, crushed beneath it all. Now he looked at the exact same skyline and saw something completely different. He did not see giants, he did not see walls, he saw targets, and one by one, he was going to take them all. But someone had been watching Min-ho rise, and it was eating him alive. Seo Jung-hyuk, the rich, arrogant heir who used to sit comfortably at the top of every class. He had been born into money, handed everything, told his whole life that he was destined to win, and he could not understand, could not accept, how a nobody from a poor family kept beating him at every single turn, test after test, rank after rank. His pride was bleeding, and slowly his wounded jealousy had curdled into something far more dangerous than rivalry. Jung-hyuk decided that if he could not beat Min-ho fairly, he would simply destroy him in the shadows. He gathered a few loyal followers in a dim hallway after class and began to plan in low, hateful whispers. The scheme was vicious. They would frame Min-ho for cheating on the biggest exam of the year, plant the forged evidence in his desk, tip off the teachers, ruin his perfect record forever, and get the golden boy expelled in public disgrace. Jung-hyuk smiled for the first time in weeks. He was absolutely certain it would work. There was just one problem. One thing Jung-hyuk could never have known. In his first life, Min-ho had watched this very same boy pull a stunt almost exactly like this against another student. He recognized every single sign. The sudden whispers, the fake friendly smiles in the hallway, the strange new interest in his exam schedule and his seating arrangement. Min-ho did not panic. He did not confront anyone. He simply sat back, watched the trap being slowly built around him, piece by careful piece, and then quietly began to build a far better trap of his own. Min-ho began documenting everything with cold precision. Every suspicious conversation he overheard, every time Jung Hyuk's friends lingered a little too long near his desk. He kept time-stamped, backed-up copies of all his own work, so nobody could ever claim he had stolen an answer. He even placed a small hidden recorder where it would catch what mattered. And then he did the most dangerous thing of all. He let Jung Hyuk believe the plan was working perfectly, because sometimes the smartest way to win is to let your enemy sprint full speed toward the cliff he dug himself. On the morning of the exam, Jung-hyuk finally made his move. While the hall was empty, he slipped the carefully forged cheat sheet deep into Min-ho's desk, his hands trembling with excitement. Then he passed an anonymous note to a strict teacher, hinting exactly where to look. It was perfect, clean, untraceable. Or at least it would have been if his target had been anyone else in the world. But Min-ho had seen this exact moment coming from a mile away, and quietly, invisibly, the trap had already begun to turn around on its maker. The teacher marched straight in, walked to Min-ho's desk, and pulled out the hidden cheat sheet for everyone to see. The entire exam hall went dead silent, heads turned. Jung-hyuk, sitting 3 rows back, could barely hide the grin spreading across his face. This was it. This was the moment he had dreamed of for months, the great fall of the perfect student. But Min-ho did not flinch. He did not beg or panic. He simply raised one hand, calm as still water, and said, with a faint smile, "May I show everyone something first?" And then Min-ho laid it all out, piece by devastating piece. The time-stamped copies of his own work, proving he never needed to cheat. The recorded conversations of the plot being planned. The footage of Jung-hyuk's own friend sneaking the paper into his desk that very morning. The handwriting on the anonymous note, an exact match for Jung-hyuk's. One by one, the trap was reassembled in front of the entire class, like a puzzle clicking into place. And every single piece, without exception, pointed straight back at one person. The color drained from Jung-hyuk's face like water from a cracked glass. The smug grin collapsed into raw terror. Slowly, every single head in that room turned away from Min-ho and toward him. The hunter had become the hunted, and he had absolutely no idea how it had happened. He stammered. He shouted denials. He pointed fingers. But the evidence was overwhelming, airtight, undeniable. And Min-ho had delivered every word of it with the calm, surgical precision of a man who had already rehearsed this exact victory in another lifetime. It was over in minutes. Jung-hyuk was dragged from his seat and marched straight to the principal's office, head hanging, classmates whispering behind their hands. The school launched a full investigation that very afternoon. His proud family name, the one thing he had always believed made him untouchable, could not save him this time. Suspension. Public humiliation. A permanent black mark on his record. The whole school now knew exactly what he had tried to do, and exactly how badly it had backfired. He had reached out to destroy Min-ho and destroyed only himself. And the damage did not stop at the school gates. Jung-hyuk's powerful family was forced to burn favors and pour out money just to keep the scandal from spreading any further. His father, a man who was used to bending the entire world to his will with a single phone call, found himself humiliated in front of his own circle of wealthy peers. Investors whispered, partners raised eyebrows. All of it, every bit of the damage, because his arrogant, spoiled son had picked a fight with exactly the wrong boy. The first crack had appeared in their empire. From that day forward, everything changed. When Min-ho walked the halls now, students unconsciously parted around him, voices dropping to whispers as he passed. They did not just respect him anymore, they feared him. The word spread through the school and then beyond it, into other schools, into the city. Cross Kang Min-ho, and you will only destroy yourself. And the most chilling part of it all, he had never once raised his voice. He had simply let his enemy walk straight into his own trap and let everyone watch it close. And then there was Yuna, the girl who, in his first wasted life, had laughed and turned him down without so much as a second thought, the rejection that had haunted him for years. She watched him now from across the busy courtyard, and her chest ached in a way she did not understand. This was the boy everyone whispered about. Brilliant, calm, untouchable, clearly going somewhere enormous. And a quiet, painful question had begun to grow inside her, louder every single day. What exactly had she thrown away? One golden autumn afternoon, she finally gathered her courage and approached him beneath the falling leaves. She smiled the way she used to, the bright, easy smile that once made his heart hammer in his chest in a life he could now barely remember feeling. She asked, softly, if maybe they could start spending more time together, maybe study after class, maybe something more than that. And for one fragile heartbeat, the old Min-ho, the lonely wounded boy buried deep inside him, almost rose up and answered her the way he always dreamed he would. But that boy was gone, and he was never coming back. Min-ho looked at her, really looked, and felt nothing but a calm, distant clarity. No anger, no bitterness, no old longing. He thanked her politely for the offer. He told her simply that he was focused entirely on his future now. And then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the falling leaves. No cruel speech, no revenge, just the quiet, final closing of a door. And Yuna stood frozen there, realizing far, far too late exactly what she had given up. Months later, the results finally came. The most prestigious university in the entire nation, the legendary institution that fed directly into the country's most powerful companies, its government, its oldest and richest bloodlines, sent back its answer in a thick, heavy envelope. Accepted. And not just accepted. Number 1. At the very top of every ranking, every list, every category, the poor nobody who once sat invisible at the back of the class had clawed and calculated his way to the absolute summit of the entire system, and he had only just begun to climb. He arrived at university not as a nervous, hopeful freshman, but as a quiet predator stepping into a brand new hunting ground. These halls were filled with the children of chairmen, of politicians, of the founding families, the very same dynasties that would one day run the empires he remembered so clearly from the future. To all of them, he was nothing, a stranger, a scholarship kid with no name and no connections. But to Min-ho, every single one of those smug faces was a future ally, a future rival, or a future victim. He just had to decide which, and the money never stopped moving. That first small, terrifying investment had quietly become several, then dozens, each one timed with perfect precision to a future that only he could see coming. He never bragged, he never showed it off. Beneath everyone's notice, in the silence between his lectures, Kang Min-ho was no longer just a clever student with some savings in the bank. He was building the foundation of something enormous, a war chest, a weapon, the first seed of an empire that did not exist yet, an empire the world would soon be unable to ignore. He stood before the great glass towers of the city once more. But this time he was not a small boy daydreaming on a school rooftop. This time he stood at the very gates of the real game, the one that truly mattered. The powerful families who had crushed people like him without a second thought in his first life were all still out there, rich, arrogant, comfortable, completely unaware that a storm was already gathering. He remembered every name, every cruel betrayal, every face that had looked down on him. And now, slowly, he was coming for all of them. School had only ever been the warm-up, a test run, a way to sharpen the blade. The real battle, the one he had truly clawed his way back from death itself to fight, was only just beginning. An empire to build from nothing. Powerful, ruthless enemies who would very soon learn his name and tremble at the sound of it. And a revenge so vast, so patient, and so absolutely complete that the people who had ruined his first life would never, ever see it coming. This was only the calm before the storm.